As a demonstration for this module, I want to show you some of the things you can do with CSS to make a collection of list items appear dramatically different, so it's not just a collection of list items that appears a bulleted list as they do now. Because right now we have a style sheet included, but the styles are empty. And before we get to anything fancy, I want to start off and give us an understanding of border, margin, and padding. Let's first go in and add some background color to our unordered list so that we can precisely see the box that is being drawn by that unordered list. I'll set this to a light gray color and refresh the browser, and there we can see the box. And let me go ahead and zoom in so that we can see some of the changes we're about to make. And so that we can compare the box represented by this UL element and the box represented by one of the list item elements, let me go in and use some CSS to go in and say, find me the list item inside of a UL, but find me a very specific list item. What I'm going to do is look for the nth child, the third nth child. We haven't covered this syntax in this module, but this is literally going out and saying, count the number of children inside of a UL element and find me not the first one, not the second one, but the third one. And what we'll do here is we'll say, set the background color to a slightly different color. The last two hexadecimal digits represent the amount of blue, so it's going to be slightly less blue, and we get sort of a goldish brown color there. And now that we can clearly see the dimensions of the box drawn by the list item, let's go in and set the padding to that element to be 10 pixels. Remember, padding pushes content inwards, away from the outer borders, so when I refresh the browser, you'll see that Blueprint now appears at least 10 pixels in from the left border, 10 pixels down from the top border, and 10 pixels up from the bottom border. It does extend all the way to the right. We'll talk about that in a bit, but this is the effect that padding would have. Now you'll notice that the box doesn't extend fully to the right. It doesn't reach the window of the browser. We still have some white space here on the right and the top and the left. Where's that white space coming from? It comes from some default padding and margin rules that are inherited from the user agent style sheet. We talked about that in the last module, and it's one of the reasons that some people will use a CSS reset or just define a style rule that says the default padding for all of my elements should be 0 pixels, and the default margin for all of my elements should be 0 pixels. And now when I refresh, you can see that our box drawn by the unordered list is now flush against all the borders of the window, or at least the left, the top, and the right borders. The box is only drawn to a height that will fully encapsulate all of the content that's inside. Now let's add a margin of 10 pixels. This margin is going to push that list item away from the adjacent list items, the one above it, the one below it, and it's also going to push it away from the left side of the window. In fact, you can see that without that margin, we're not even seeing the little dot that typically appears in a bulleted list. Let me increase the margin just a little bit more to make sure that dot fully appears, and I'll show you the proper CSS approach to removing that. That is to set the list style type, and from here you can actually pick what sort of icon you want to appear. What I'm going to pick is none, so that when we refresh the browser, that dot doesn't even appear. There are no bullets associated with this list anymore. Many times you'll see this abbreviated to just list style none. That will have the same effect. And so that we can more clearly see this effect, let's remove this nth child selector and just apply the background color, padding, and margin to all of the list items. And let's also draw a border around each of them. So let me say that the border style is going to be a solid line. Notice you can also pick from a double line, a dotted line, a ridged line. Solid is one of the more popular selections though. I'm going to set the border color, the color of that line, to be black. And I'm also going to set the border width in pixels so that we'll have a 2-pixel border around each of these. And now it should be very obvious that the space inside of that border is the padding setting. The space outside of that between the elements is the margin. And we're already starting to see that we've transformed this list into something that doesn't quite look like a bulleted list anymore.